Okay, what the fuck is going on with Cuba, right? So we know what happened with Venezuela and Maduro. The U.S. went in, they took the oil, they deposed the leader. The Venezuelan people were happy, but of course everybody knows that the U.S. government wants the oil. There's talk of all these different motives. Now, next in the U.S. government sights is Cuba, right? The government's terrible. The people are unhappy. Of course, we've got Raul Castro, Fidel Castro's brother, who took over after Fidel Castro passed. And he has, I think, his grandson who's running things with him. I guess one of them is the leader, the brother of Fidel's the leader, and the grandson, also named Raul Castro, is the president, if I remember correctly. And so we've learned that Cuba is in the government's sights, the White House's sights, and that maybe we'll go and invade there. And then recently we've learned that Raul Castro was indicted, I think, on shooting either a plane or two or a boat or two down in the late 90s. Very interesting that they finally indicted Raul Castro on this from over 20 years ago. So I myself have been wondering what kind of political motivations there are with this new development. So I'm very interested in this clip. Let's get off into it.
And time to get to the indictment of the former Cuban president, Raul Castro. We've got our Matt Rivers, who knows the story very well. Matt, the top search on this story is, who is Raul Castro? What can you tell us?
That's a fair question. If you're not really into Cuba, or you're not really a student of history, maybe you don't know who Raul Castro is. He's not the current leader right now of Cuba. He's the former president, and perhaps most famously, he's the brother of Fidel Castro, the longtime leader of Cuba, who really was the leader of that revolution back in the 50s. He led that island for a very long time. When he died, his brother Raul took over, and he was president for a while, a few years there, until he stepped down recently. He's 94 years old at this point, Steph.
And Matt, a lot of people are asking, why was he indicted? A lot of people are searching. Why?
Interestingly enough, just as a sidebar, everyone knows Spencer Pratt is running for mayor in Los Angeles, and he's been talking a little bit about Karen Bass. And Karen Bass, in her younger career, apparently went to Cuba and was intrigued by Fidel Castro. I've heard. I'm not sure, so I want to look a little bit more into that. If any of you guys know about that, please put it inside the comments. Very curious to suss out the connection between Fidel Castro and Karen Bass. So I've seen some hints that maybe she's a big fan of communism. Interestingly, Spencer Pratt, and I know this is a sidebar, Spencer Pratt, Fidel Castro was a communist, I believe, and Karen Bass most recently suggested, right, that LA taxpayers pay for meth addicts, drug addicts in LA to have their teeth fixed. Now, I'm all for altruism and helping people. However, a lot of Angelenos are upset because you can't walk into parks anymore. You can't walk in certain places without stepping on human feces, and there's tense places. And so Bass has just done a really terrible job in many Angelenos' minds of keeping that city clean for the paying taxpayer and responsible individuals to enjoy. And it's just a complete tragedy. So that's why, at least to a large degree, Spencer Pratt has been gaining so much momentum. But let's continue this story and finding out more about Raul Castro. This is also very interesting.
Why was he indicted, and what does it mean?
Yeah, it's a good question. So basically, this all goes back to something that happened in 1996. There was a group here called Brothers to the Rescue, based out of South Florida. And basically, at that time, there were tens of thousands of Cubans fleeing the island, trying to get to the United States. This group was a humanitarian aid group that would fly these planes all around Cuba, dropping leaflets on the island in a kind of an activist sense, but also looking for Cubans who were on those rafts, trying to help the Coast Guard find these people so they wouldn't end up dying on the rough journey between Cuba and the United States. It was at one of those times that the Cuban military, actually a MiG fighter jet launched by the Cubans, shot down 2 of those planes that killed 3 Americans in the process. So 30 years later, the Justice Department says they've now got enough evidence to charge Raul Castro. They say he was ultimately the one responsible.
That is a long time to collect evidence. I don't know if I'm buying that story that only now they have enough evidence. I guess it's possible.
For giving that order, and that's why that indictment was unsealed yesterday.
And Matt, where is Raul Castro right now? And we know he was not the leader of Cuba. He's not the current president, but who is running Cuba right now?
Grandson.
So the current president of Cuba is a guy named Miguel Diaz-Canel. But, you know, everybody still thinks that the Castro family, led by Raul Castro, remains the most influential family.
Interesting that he's not talking about the grandson at all. Let me just dig a little bit here. Let's dig a little bit here. Raul Castro's grandson, Raul, plays what role in Cuba currently? Raul Castro's 41-year-old grandson, Raul Guillermo Rodriguez Castro, does not hold a formal civilian government post but serves as a powerful political advisor, intermediary, and de facto gatekeeper to his grandfather, who remains central to Cuba's decision-making. Okay, so like they said, the Castro family is just very, very, very involved still in making a lot of the decisions.
Family on the island. He's 94 years old. Raul is, you know, we saw him when I was in Cuba a few weeks ago.
Jeez, so the U.S. isn't the only one that has these super old leaders. I can't imagine if the U.S. had a 94-year-old president. I mean, maybe in 20 or 30 years from now when 94 is the new 50, because we're all so much healthier. Have you guys noticed that people are living so much longer now? When I was a kid, there weren't many people over 100, and now it seems like they're everywhere.
This parade that they held in public in front of the U.S. Embassy on May 1st. He's definitely slowing down. He's older, but the Castro family, with Raul at its head, still remains incredibly influential in terms of the day-to-day goings-on inside the government there.
All right, Matt, thanks.
Very interesting stuff. I'm going to try and continue keeping you guys updated on the story as it progresses, as I do with all stories. Get out and enjoy this beautiful day if you can, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.